Hello, everyone. At the Court Martial Podcast, I am your colonial champion, Sean McCarty. I'm coming to you from Worcester, England. I've been on a 10-day trip, and I have been, for the past 12 or 13 hours or so, debating how I feel about the major breaking news that has taken place in the wrestling world, that has shaken the wrestling world to its core. That, of course, being the death of Hulk Hogan. And I wanted to just share some brief thoughts. When I'm back from Worcester, we will reconvene with Josh Ageddon and Skylar and have a full-blown podcast discussing all of this in detail. But I've been back and forth about how I feel about this, and I just wanted to share my quick thoughts with you before we get more in depth to it later. And ultimately, I've wanted to feel sad about this. I really have. I've wanted to feel sad about Hulk dying, and I just can't. And to be fair, it's not even just about the Gawker tapes, right? That's it's a huge piece of Hogan's legacy, but it's a small piece of who Hulk Hogan, the person, was. Taking his wrestling career out of it, taking what his drawing power was out of it, and his charisma out of it, and the quality of his matches, and the political games and all of that, just who Terry Bollea was as a human being, makes it very difficult for me to feel a level of sympathy, because to me, his overt manipulation of people behind the scenes, his manipulation of children, just recently we heard that story about Hogan no-showing the waiting line for, I guess that was a tour of his beer or whatever it was, that they were going to see him in upstate New York, and the little 5-6-year-old kids cutting a promo on him. And this is all in his last year, where he was suddenly Christian without any level of change or atonement in his behavior, which is as most of his career was, performative. And I guess that's maybe where I'm having a tough disconnect here, because Terry Bollea, the person, can't be celebrated. In my eyes, he can't be celebrated. Hulk Hogan, the career, sure, you can. But the man makes it very difficult, especially he did himself no favors. He had opportunities to atone or have share remorse, and he overtly decided not to do those things. And he made sure that he alienated himself from the man that he fully immersed himself into the gimmick to. The eat your vitamins, say your prayers, and stand for what's right. Hogan did none of those things in actuality and in practice. And while everyone is talking about the legacy and the impact that he had in touching the lives of millions of people, and there is something to be said about that, but simultaneously, there is some level of how does the wrestling business end up having these many figureheads, these most known and notorious human beings that are in this business, the most famous, like Vince Jr., like Hulk Hogan, like Chris Benoit. How is it that some of the most famous people that we have in this industry are the ones that have the deepest and most despicable skeletons in the closet? And my lamentation over this past 24 hours has not been for Hulk Hogan. I really don't care. I really am not sad that he's gone. And I know that's terrible to say, but I'm really not sad that he's gone. What I'm sad about is that the wrestling business doesn't have more figureheads that makes a fan like myself proud to be one. And instead, we have to do what we've always done and defend ourselves in liking this thing, because there's such shame attached to it. And it's a shame that when Vince was melting the program, as his brain was simultaneously melting and he was shitting on the heads of paralegals, this whole facet of how wrestling is, where it's just laden with despicable people, makes it really hard to be a wrestling fan. It makes it really hard because it's just a layer of shame and guilt and defense that you have to build in to something that I really love, something where the storylines of justice and heroism and villains and heat and being able to captivate and really teach justice, that's so valuable to our society, and be able to teach the landscape of how these types of things are. And it's just so painfully marred by people like Hulk and people like Vince. So much so that I'm not mourning Hogan's death, and I can't celebrate his life because I'm lamenting the fact that professional wrestling doesn't have more respectable figureheads atop it, and wrestling deserves better than that. More to come on the CMP.